Tanya Kach, a name that once belonged to a bright-eyed 14-year-old girl from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, whose world was supposed to be filled with the simple worries of homework, friends, and teenage dreams. But in 1996, Tanya's story took a turn that no one could have imagined. One moment, she was a child trying to find her place in the world, and the next, she vanished. For her family, it was as if she had been swallowed by the earth. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then into years. 10 long years to be exact. 10 years where her loved ones cried themselves to sleep, fearing the worst, while Tanya was trapped in a nightmare only a few streets away. What makes this story even more chilling is that Tanya wasn't taken by a stranger. Lurking in the shadows, she was groomed, manipulated, and stolen away by someone she thought she could trust. A 37-year-old school security guard named Thomas Hose. He promised her safety, love, and an escape from her troubled home life. But what he really gave her was a prison. Behind the walls of his home, Tanya's entire childhood and adolescence was stolen, hidden in plain sight, while the world kept turning without her. This is not just a story about a missing person. This is the story of a young girl who disappeared into silence for an entire decade, only to re-emerge one day with a secret so haunting it shook her entire community. And how, after years of stolen freedom, Tanya finally found her voice, her courage, and a chance to reclaim her life. Tanya's disappearance didn't look like a Hollywood-style abduction. There were no screeching tires, no masked stranger jumping out of the shadows. It was far quieter, more insidious, and that made it all the more dangerous. In 1996, Tanya was just 14, living with her father in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. Like so many kids her age, she was caught in the tension between wanting independence and struggling with the rules at home. She often felt misunderstood, like no one was really listening to her. That's when Thomas Hose entered her life. He wasn't a stranger lurking in the dark. He was a school security guard, a man in his late 30s who carried an air of authority, someone Tanya should have been able to trust. But Jose saw vulnerability where others saw a child. Slowly, carefully, he began grooming her, slipping compliments into conversations, telling her that he understood her better than anyone else, planting the idea that she deserved something more than the life she had. For a lonely teenager, desperate to be seen, his words were intoxicating. Jose wasn't just kind, he was strategic. He made Tanya feel special, convincing her that he could offer the love and stability she craved. And so, one day, Tanya didn't run away in the traditional sense. She stepped willingly into the trap Jose had been weaving around her. What she thought was an escape from her troubles became the start of a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Her father reported her missing almost immediately. Flyers went up. The police were contacted. For her family, it was unthinkable that she would simply vanish. But Tanya left behind almost no trail, no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, nothing to point investigators in the right direction. Weeks turned into months. The community whispered theories. Had she run away? Had someone taken her? Could she still be alive? For Jose, hiding Tanya became a twisted game of control. He didn't keep her locked in a basement with chains. He imprisoned her through fear and manipulation. At first, Tanya was hidden away in his bedroom, her entire existence reduced to a single space. She wasn't allowed to make noise, wasn't allowed to move freely. Her world shrank down to the four walls of Jose's house. He convinced her that if she ever tried to leave, no one would believe her, that the world had already forgotten her. And terrifyingly, on the outside, that appeared to be true. Years passed, and Tanya's name faded from the headlines. People assumed she had run away for good. Jose used that silence to tighten his grip. He cut Tanya off from the world, molding her into a secret he could control. But Tanya wasn't gone. She was right there, living just a few blocks away from the very people searching for her, slowly losing her childhood day by day. For years, Tanya lived in a nightmare that most people couldn't even begin to imagine. While the world outside kept turning, seasons changing, her classmates graduating, friends growing up, Tanya was frozen in time, trapped in Thomas Jose's house, hidden from everyone who loved her. Her life became a rigid routine, controlled entirely by him. At first, she was confined to his bedroom. Days bled into nights, and Tanya would sit in silence, her only company being the man who had stolen her childhood. Jose would feed her lies, over and over again, telling her that her father didn't want her, that the police weren't looking for her, that if she ever tried to run, she would be arrested or worse. To a vulnerable teenager, those words carried weight. Slowly, he rewired her mind to believe she was powerless. As time passed, Jose grew bolder. He started introducing her to the outside world, but under conditions that kept her invisible. He told neighbors and friends that Tanya was his girlfriend, carefully grooming her appearance to make her look older, to disguise the shocking truth of who she really was. Imagine that, being paraded in front of people, but no one knowing you were the missing girl from the flyers years ago. Tanya had become a ghost in plain sight. Jose exerted total psychological control. He wouldn't let her speak freely. He wouldn't let her call her family. Every interaction was carefully monitored. Even when Tanya's father lived just blocks away, she couldn't reach out. The thought of knocking on his door, of saying, "I'm alive, I'm here," felt impossible. Jose's manipulation was so deep, so twisted, that Tanya truly believed she had no choice but to stay. The years dragged on. Tanya watched as her childhood slipped away. She missed birthdays, holidays, milestones. She went from being a bright, curious 14-year-old girl to a young woman who barely recognized herself in the mirror. And yet, Jose still insisted on controlling every part of her identity. And then came the most chilling part. Tanya became so conditioned to this hidden life that she forgot what freedom even felt like. Her world revolved around Jose, and the walls he built around her mind were harder to escape than any locked door. For nearly a decade, Tanya was forced to live this double life, hidden in captivity, yet standing right in front of the world. And no one, not her father, not her neighbors, not even the police, realized the truth. But cracks in Jose's control were beginning to show. Tanya was growing older, stronger, and deep inside, a voice she had long silenced was starting to whisper, "This isn't the life you were meant to live. You deserve freedom." After 10 long years of living as a prisoner in plain sight, Tanya Kach finally began to see a small glimmer of hope. The cracks in Thomas Jose's control were widening. She was no longer that 14-year-old girl he had lured away. She was a young woman now, and with age came a new awareness. Jose had stolen her childhood, but he couldn't completely crush her spirit. One of the turning points came when Jose grew complacent. He had gotten so used to the control he had over Tanya that he allowed her small freedoms, carefully monitored, of course, but freedoms nonetheless. Tanya began helping out at a local convenience store where she interacted with people outside of Jose's influence for the first time in years. It was in this environment that Tanya realized something shocking. People saw her as a normal young woman. No one suspected she was the girl who had disappeared years ago. Jose had conditioned her to believe that if she spoke out, she'd be thrown in jail or shunned by society. But out there, in those brief moments of normalcy, Tanya could feel the lies unraveling. People treated her with kindness. They asked her questions. They smiled at her. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of her own identity return. It was through these small, cautious steps into the outside world that Tanya met someone she would never forget. A store owner named Joe. Unlike everyone else, Joe took a real interest in her. He noticed something wasn't right. Tanya seemed anxious, timid, and careful with every word she said. Jose always lingered nearby, watching. But Joe saw the fear in Tanya's eyes, and he didn't dismiss it. Slowly, Tanya began to confide in him, piece by piece. She didn't reveal everything at once. She was terrified of Jose finding out, but she hinted at the truth. She told Joe that she hadn't seen her family in years, that she was living a life she didn't want, that she needed help. Joe listened, and most importantly, he believed her. This was the moment Tanya had been waiting for without even realizing it. Someone she could trust. Someone outside of Jose's control. With Joe's encouragement, Tanya began to plan her escape. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was a quiet, calculated choice that built up over time. Every word she spoke to Joe was a tiny act of rebellion, a step toward freedom. Then, one day in March 2006, Tanya found her courage. She told Joe the full truth, that she had been missing for a decade, that her real name was Tanya Kach, and that Thomas Jose had been holding her captive all those years. Joe knew immediately what he had to do. He contacted the police. When authorities arrived, Tanya's nightmare began to collapse. After 10 long years of silence, she was finally free. Jose was arrested, charged with child endangerment, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and other crimes. His twisted double life was exposed to the world. And Tanya, for the first time since she was 14 years old, she could finally breathe. But her story wasn't over yet. The arrest was just the beginning of a new journey, one filled with emotional reunions, painful healing, and the struggle to reclaim the years she had lost. Tanya Kach's freedom was not the neat, storybook ending one might imagine. In March of 2006, when police finally pulled her away from Thomas Jose's grip, the world outside had changed beyond recognition. She had gone missing as a scared 14-year-old girl, and now she was a 24-year-old woman trying to piece together an identity that had been stolen from her. The reunion with her family was as emotional as it was overwhelming. Her parents, who had lived with the ache of not knowing whether their daughter was alive or dead, could barely believe she was standing in front of them. There were tears, embraces, and a flood of emotions that words could never fully capture. But alongside the joy, there was also pain. Tanya had missed a decade of her life. Holidays, birthdays, milestones. She had to learn how to navigate a world that had moved forward without her. For Tanya, freedom came with its own set of struggles. She had to heal from years of psychological manipulation, rebuild relationships with family members who had been frozen in grief for so long, and confront the trauma that Jose had left behind. She was free, yes, but she was also scarred. Despite it all, Tanya chose to fight for her life. She became determined not to let Jose's crimes define her future. Over time, she began to tell her story publicly, bravely speaking about what happened in order to raise awareness of grooming and long-term captivity. In interviews, she shed light on the way predators operate, not just through force, but through lies, manipulation, and control that break down a victim's sense of self. Her voice became a powerful tool for others who had endured similar pain. Thomas Hose, meanwhile, would never see freedom again. Convicted and sentenced to prison, he faced the reality of his crimes in the only way justice could deliver. The man who once walked around as a respected school security guard, someone parents thought they could trust, was now reduced to nothing more than a criminal stripped of power. Tanya's story is one of survival, but also one of resilience. She didn't just escape, she rebuilt. She transformed her suffering into strength, and in doing so, she showed the world that even after a decade of darkness, the human spirit can still find light. And so, Tanya Kach's name is no longer just associated with the girl who disappeared. It is now tied to courage, survival, and hope. If you've stayed with me through Tanya's incredible journey, take a moment to reflect on the importance of never giving up hope for the missing, and never underestimating the strength of those who survive the unthinkable. And if this story moved you the way it moved me, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more true stories of survival and resilience. Your support helps bring these stories to light and ensures that the voices of survivors like Tanya are never forgotten. Because in the end, Tanya's story is proof. Even after 10 years of silence, the truth can still set you free.